Good morning, good evening, and good night to everyone out there on the internet. You're listening to Lancing with myself, the 5-minute weekly show where I talk about being a freelance game designer and creative when you're low on spoons and low on cash. I'm Steve D from Tin Star Games, and this week I want to talk more about how we go through the long term. Last episode, I talked about how game design is a long, slow, exhaustive process, and I've come back to this theme over and over again, that game design is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a long time, and you want to do it for your whole life, or at least the more you do it, the better you get at it, and it's something you should plan for to do for a long time. You can't dip into this hobby. You can't dip into an art form. You know, art is life, and life is art, and the more you do it, the longer you do it, the better you get at it. And you get return for this long process is basically the theme for today. We talked that it takes forever, and the flip side of that is that every step you take is actually improving your relationship with your audience. There's an old marketing saw that people need 7 touches of your product before they actually trust you, on average. They have to see or hear about you 7 times before they go, yeah, okay, I'm convinced. And what's happening with you as an artist is similar, that you are slowly putting more and more of yourself out there. And that's not just when you're putting product out there, but that's whenever you're talking about your product. These days, because of social media, there's no time that we're not advertising, basically. We are constantly interacting with our audience in all sorts of ways, in the smallest and the slightest ways. So every time you're talking about the process and you're doing Kickstarter updates or talking about, trying to get resources or pitching ideas or talking out loud about your next idea, all of this is in a way relating to your audience in different kinds of ways. Now, product and outcomes are the most concrete way to do that, but either way, all of these things are adding up. And just because one game takes forever doesn't mean you can't already be working on the next game and starting with some of that process of advertising and seeding the market and getting people excited. And all of this long process, because you can keep giving lots of updates, because there is that you can press and do advertising about every step of this process, all of it is accreting in the people's minds your brand, your reliability, your sense of product. Now, that isn't just a commercial thing for an artist. It's also about your identity and the way you work and the things you are interested in and your style and your truth. And that's the beauty of the marathon, is that every time you create something, you're having more and more of this conversation with your audience about who you are and what you believe and what you make and what kind of things you make. And every time you do that, you're building this relationship. You're building a sense of trust. I keep quoting Billy Joel, and that's because I'm an old man, but it is all about trust. It is a matter of trust, this relationship between the artist and the audience. Although we are interested in the new, mostly as human beings, we like the comfortable and we like the familiar. And we love it when we find an artist who is interesting to us and is going to be somewhat familiar. And the beauty of this relationship is that, you are slowly building up this relationship with these people, with your audience, and going, here's more of me, here's some more of me. You can get used to it. It's not always going to be exactly the same, but you're getting used to the fact that I'm reliable, that I'm producing things you're interested in, that I'm interesting, that I have these quirks and foibles, and we're creating a dialogue of sorts. It is almost entirely a one-way dialogue, but it's still a sense of communication. And all of communication leads to trust, and trust leads to relationship, and relationship, cycles back and builds more trust. And I think that's a good thing to think about, is you ever think, even though you might think that, I've made so many games and I've struggled to make an impact, everything that you're doing is adding to this pile that is slowly creeping into people's consciousness. And when they come to you and discover that back catalog, that will add to that relationship. No matter what point they come in on it, being able to sort of tunnel back and learn more about you will add to that sense of trust. So nothing is ever lost, even though people might, you might make games for 40 years and nobody's going to know and really connect to them until that point. That accretion of stuff is going to really hit them with a sense of, there's a lot here. There's a lot here that I can rely on and I can look through and I can explore, and that produces that sense of reliability and that sense of trust. That is what product is all about. building this trust with your audience, and this sense of knowing that you are not just a fly-by-night, but knowing who you are. And that's what the marathon is all about. So never stop making games, never stop putting them out there, even if they're just sitting in a pile and you can't figure out how to get them to people. The idea of producing and putting them out and publishing them in some form is building up that relationship, that sense of trust. This is someone who makes stuff. I know who they are. I get a sense of who they are. I think of them as therefore something that is bankable and interesting, and I want to explore more and more. Ultimately, friendship and art is about volume. The more you see people, the more you end up liking them, generally. So just keep being out there. Just keep making stuff, because you're building up trust. That's your goal with your audience. You know, to say, here I am, don't judge me, love me, explore me, read me, see me. And people aren't going to do that until they feel like it's a bit safe. And that's what you're building up, that sense of, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm going to take you somewhere, and you can trust me. That's what your art is for. And that's what the long path, the marathon, is all about. So keep putting things out there, keep establishing trust, and you'll find eventually that it will return as people see more of you, they'll love more of you, and they'll want more from you. And that's what it's all about. So that's what that's the return of the marathon. So don't sweat that it takes forever. Till next time, I've been Steve D. This has been Lancing with myself. Be good, play games, pat dogs, have fun.